when you don't have that protection, when you don't have that security, when you don't have models for that, when you're not able to take that regulating significant other in and make that, carry that kind voice, that regulating voice inside, everything is more challenging, right? Relationships are scary, are overwhelming. It's hard to stay in your body when you're frightened or feel ashamed or feel incapable or incompetent. You wind up shutting down and disconnecting from your somatic self.
In this video, I'm talking with authors of the book Every Memory Deserves Respect, Debbie, Korn, and Michael Baldwin. Michael Baldwin is an accomplished leader in the communications industry with more than 35 years of award-winning work in advertising. He is the founder and principal of the branding and communication firm Michael Baldwin, Inc., and he's the author of Just Add Water, an incredibly easy guide to creating simple, powerful presentations. He lives in New York. Debbie maintains a private practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's an adjunct training faculty member at the Trauma Research Foundation and is a senior faculty member at the EMDR Institute. Debbie has authored many articles and chapters focused on EMDR therapy, including comprehensive reviews of EMDR applications with complex PTSD. She's an MDR-approved consultant and is also on the editorial board of the Journal of EMDR Practice and Research. Debbie presents and consults internationally on the treatment of adult survivors of childhood abuse and neglect. Every Memory Deserves Respect, Michael and Debbie's book about EMDR therapy, is a great resource for anyone who's interested in EMDR therapy, including clients and clinicians. Here's the interview. Debbie Korn, welcome back to the Art and Science of EMDR, and Michael Baldwin, welcome, and thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Rotem.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, so we are talking today about the book you co-authored, Every Memory Deserves Respect, EMDR, the proven trauma therapy with the power to heal. And so I read the book, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the images and the summaries, but I think more than anything else, of course, the writing, I enjoy the perspective of both a very experienced EMDR clinician and a client. We EMDR therapists, we read a lot, and we typically read about a therapist perspective. And I think it was really refreshing and interesting to read both perspectives. So I want to start with you, Michael, and ask you about some of the information you shared and the reasons for sharing this information, because what you shared was not easy. You shared a lot of personal information that most people don't share. And I wanted to ask about the reasons. What is your why? What made you share such personal information?
So it may sound, excuse me, ironic, but I thought if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have the effect that I was looking for readers, which was to help other people be more comfortable about talking, even thinking about, even facing themselves without talking with other people, their own situations. And there's no doubt in my mind that as I don't want to use the word, as traumatic as my history was, that there aren't people all over the world with trauma histories that are dramatic and heartbreaking. And so I felt that it was honestly, the least I could do was to be honest, to help other people feel more comfortable facing their own, just themselves, and then maybe coming forward and sharing it and maybe actually seeking help like I did.
Yes, Thank you, Michael. You mentioned in the book that you've had many years of therapy before EMDR. You've had 7 different therapists before you started EMDR with somewhat limited results. So do you mind sharing a little about what was helpful and what was not helpful about the therapy that you had prior to EMDR?
I would say in the aggregate, it wasn't collectively helpful because I didn't find the relief I was looking for.
Mhm.
And I had done several forms of therapy. I had done talk therapy, CBT therapy, intensive dynamic psychotherapy. And the last therapy I had was again talk therapy. And I just felt like I was just treading water and I wasn't going anywhere. And it wasn't, not to dismiss those forms of therapy at all, but in my case, particularly because it was trauma related, even though I didn't know it, you can't carve a statue with a spoon.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about trauma a lot in the book, and I am wondering about how trauma affected your life as an adult. So whether if it's, some of the classic trauma related symptoms and some other issues that you experienced as a result of the trauma.
I would say, starting at infancy and as a child, the trauma had to do with having parents misattuned to me as a child, to me and my needs, basically just like this, and serious neglect, which started in infancy. And I was thinking about the best way to describe this: attachment, learning how to attach to another human being as an adult. It's something you learn if you're lucky, if you have a healthy attachment style growing up. I did not. So I grew up as an adult having no idea. It's like no idea, where the holes in the bowling ball were. Where are they? I couldn't really be connected with people, certainly not on any kind of intimate level with a woman. And so my sort of overall strategy from a symptom standpoint was kind of a grandiose approach to life. I became a status and achievement junkie, and I think people would engage with me, even friends, but certainly people who didn't know me well, and would come away having no real idea of what the core person was really like. I could see the clothes you're wearing, you talk about what you're doing, and your obvious preoccupation with things and symbols and achievement, but I can't get an idea of who he is. That was kind of, in a broad stroke, my survival strategy: grandiosity.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the status and achievement junkie? What does that look like? What does it feel like to be in that experience?
That feels like that feels like spending 3 years to get into medical school and then not going. Then spending 13 days to get a job in advertising, which I'd never done before. Then getting my first suit at Brooks Brothers for my $10,000 a year advertising job, where the whole experience is completely ritualized.
Yeah.
Going down to the South End to this sort of Italian seamstress little store and sifting through spool after spool to get just the right tint of thread, to have just the right size and font of the logo of the monogram in the right position of my shirts, things like that. Running the Boston Marathon and being obsessed about, I couldn't walk a step. I had to finish it. If I'd walked one step, it would have been completely ruined. And then the funny thing about it is the achievement takes place, and then it just sort of evaporates. You have to look for the next one. And then if you line them all up, they don't offer you any kind of sustained or solid sense of self. So that anytime I had a negative comment, or particularly in the case of a client, might have had some disparaging remark, I would just go off a cliff. And I'm no good. I'm worthless. I'm going to end up penniless. I'll be that guy, on the street in front of Walgreens you step over to go into the store. I mean, it would just send me just total race to the bottom.
Yeah, and that was pretty much what I read in the book, your whole adult life, until you've done successful EMDR treatment. So I want to ask Michael, what is your message to people who are considering, kind of on the fence about getting trauma treatment and they're not sure whether they should go with that or not?
Okay, so what I've heard is, and I'm going to paraphrase clinical language, that we're born pretty much healthy, but we're born into an environment, whatever trauma that is what we become, because we're put in that environment. And I would say intervention, I'm guessing maybe around in your early 20s would be a wonderful time to have some kind of course correction. In my case, now I know, would be EMDR.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, Francine had not even discovered EMDR therapy, so it was not available to me. Yeah. So my message to people today is it's simply two words: don't wait. If you are suffering, if someone you know is suffering, you can avail yourself of an EMDR therapist. There's one website in particular, emdria.org, where you can put in a zip code and you can find certified EMDR therapists and consultants. And that wasn't available to me. So if you accept the notion that that symptoms are a result of unprocessed traumatic memories, these symptoms don't go away, they'll continue until you address the trauma and the traumatic memories, that the sooner you do it, the sooner you can go on and live your life. But unless and until you do, you're going to be plagued by the repercussions of those trauma and those traumatic memories.
Yes, you talk about EMDR like a lot of clients who had successful treatment with confidence. And I want to transition the conversation now and ask Debbie, who also talks in the book about being confident, saying to clients that in the first session that despite being injured, they can recover. So Debbie, can you talk a little bit about this level of confidence that you have?
Yeah. Well, there's probably two aspects to that confidence. One is I've been doing EMDR for 30 years, and I have seen people transform their lives in dramatic, profound ways. And so, with every case, with every challenge that gets overcome, I think I've been able to gather a little bit more confidence that I carry with me to every new case. So, one aspect is absolute, genuine from head to toe. And I'm going to bring that to my clients. And I can say, look, I've got 30 years of experience here, and I've got a whole body of research literature behind EMDR as well. We can do this. We can do this. The other aspect is, even if there's somebody sitting in front of me whose case is so complex and so daunting, right? I'm the 30th therapist they've come to see in their short lifetime. Even in those moments, I really feel like it is our responsibility. It is our duty to be carriers of hope. To be, Dick Schwartz uses I love his term, we need to be hope merchants, right? We're delivering hope. And I think I approach every case with curiosity, with compassion, and with a deep intention to help. And that's what I'm delivering. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying even it's going to be quick, but I'm committed, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes on your behalf to help you get to the other side.
Thank you for saying that, Debbie. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the differences from your perspective, from the clinician perspective, about the differences between EMDR and talk therapy.
Yeah. Well, I think the primary difference is that talk therapies, plural, are primarily top-down processes. Top-down meaning, it involves language, it involves the thinking brain, and doesn't necessarily access the emotional brain, doesn't necessarily access, the lower brain, the instinctual brain, where trauma resides. At some level, it's fair to say that the body keeps the score, right? And that memory is held both in explicit forms and implicit forms. And implicit memory is held at a body level, at a somatic level, at an experiential level. And so I think any comprehensive psychotherapy, any effective trauma-informed psychotherapy has to include both top-down and bottom-up approaches. So bottom up, meaning we go to the body and we let the body lead. We go to affect, to emotion, and we really prioritize the processing at those levels. You know, Francine Shapiro used to say that the shift in cognition was secondary to the shift at the emotional and somatic levels. And so when we let the body lead, when we attend to the body, where the client is able to experience a transformation that they can then put words on, new words, right? They have insight, which is a higher cortical function. So again, we're in EMDR, we're back and forth between right brain, left brain. We're back and forth between bottom up and top down processing. So we're working in this integrative way where the client is experiencing and processing, and then they're reflecting. You know, when we say, what do you get now? What do you notice? What does that say about you? What did you learn about yourself today? Yeah. You have a transformative experience, and then you reflect on it. And so that moves the dial forward in terms of change and healing.
Yeah. And in the book, you talk a lot about attachment. Both you and Michael talk about attachment, specifically attachment ruptures that start in childhood. And you have a quote that I really like by Harvard psychologist Carlin Lyons Ruth, that says that the attachment system can be thought of as the psychological version of the immune system. Right. So can you say a few words about that?
Yeah. You know, we've been learning a lot about attachment and the attachment system in the last 20, 30 years. You know, I think our knowledge about attachment has expanded right alongside our knowledge about trauma processing and EMDR. And, you know, we know that secure attachment both combats and reduces stress. And it really, in the same way that the immune system combats stress and combats illness, we know that when an infant, when a child can rely on a secure attachment in going out into the world and dealing with whatever the world hands them, they are so much more protected than if they come from an insecure or neglectful early life. And so there really are parallels between the immune system and the attachment system. And we also know this in terms of the ACE study. We know that the higher the exposure to adverse childhood experiences, the higher the numbers are, the higher the stats are in terms of physical illness and stress-related illness.
Right, which is very, very interesting, the ACE studies and how this very, very strong correlation. In terms of the ability to self-regulate, how does trauma affect individuals' ability to self-regulate later in, you know, in childhood, but also into adulthood?
Right. Well, you know, in the book, we talk about all different kinds of regulation. I really do think of complex PTSD as a disorder of a dysregulation disorder. Yes. And so we can think about emotional dysregulation. We could think about behavioral dysregulation, relational dysregulation, somatic dysregulation, attentional dysregulation or dissociation. So when you are in a secure early relationship, that other person, that adult, that caregiver helps you regulate through difficult experiences. They help you stay within that window of tolerance where you are able to feel and experience, but it's not overwhelming. It's not too much. And, or if it is overwhelming, you can come back down into a zone that feels tolerable. when you don't have that protection, when you don't have that security, when you don't have models for that, when you're not able to take that regulating significant other in and make that, carry that kind voice, that regulating voice inside, everything is more challenging, right? Relationships are scary, are overwhelming. It's hard to stay in your body when you're frightened or feel ashamed or feel incapable or incompetent. You wind up shutting down and disconnecting from your somatic self. And if you're not connected to your body and you're not connected to your emotions, then it's going to be pretty darn hard to feel connected to other human beings.
Right. So I wonder if we can talk a little more about that, about relational dysregulation. In the book, you mentioned relational dysregulation, which I thought was interesting because I think that as clinicians during the COVID pandemic, where a lot of people had to be stuck at home and all the changes, how they affected us, we've seen a lot of relational dysregulation. And specifically, you mentioned a term that I actually was not familiar with before reading the book, attachment at any cost. Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to say something about that. And Michael actually might have a comment about that as well, because I think that concept applied to his experience growing up in his family. But it's the idea that human beings prioritize attachment above all else, right? If you don't attach to someone, to something, even if that someone is an awful someone, you don't make it in the world. You're not able to thrive. You're not able to thrive, but you're barely able to make it. So, so children cut off from their needs, they cut off from their feelings, they cut off from their anger in order to stay connected to an adult. So they're not alone in the world, because it's better to have someone than to have no one. That profound and utter aloneness is unbearable.
Yes.
And so in cutting off from oneself, you don't continue to grow. Your self doesn't expand, and you're not fully alive in the world. And so you continue to operate and you continue to move forward in the world as if you were a young child, with the same beliefs and the same, looking through the same lenses as you had when you were quite young.
Yes, thank you, David. Michael, I'm wondering if you can talk about attachment at any cost from your perspective. How did it develop in your case, and how did attachment at any cost affect you as an adult?
So for me, that it's funny. I remember having this discussion with Dr. Magnavita often, many times in his office, because I had no attachment whatsoever with my father. And my mother's was so incredibly tenuous that expression of that set of words came up because it just talked about how I'd be willing to put up with pretty much anything to get anything anything sort of wildly resembling what a real attachment would feel like, but really just crumbs.
Yes.
So, being willing to put up with pretty much anything to get just something. And in my case, that was the set of circumstances that would lead to my reactions when certain things happened, when boundary issues would have happened, and where I would go into kind of a freeze mode rather than a protestation mode, because I don't want to protest because I would risk losing the slight, very tenuous thread that I had.
Yeah. In the book, Michael, you talk about ROI, which is not the ROI that therapists are used to talking about, where you're talking about the return on investment. What is the most important return on investment of EMDR therapy?
So I have, the biggest, broadest stroke I can give people is what occurred to me the other day, which is being able to trade in your current operating system for a new one. So you go from 1.0 to 2.0. And in my case, 1.0 was filled, I would wake up in college with just overwhelming dread. I had no idea why. Recurring nightmares, I had no idea why. Having no real foundation for confidence or security or structure, because it was always very, very tenuous, house of cards kind of a thing. So 2.0 for me is being able to wake up in the morning and not feel dread and not feel worried and have confidence in my own talents in the business that I have with my clients. And it sounds very weird, but I think I'm guessing that if I had grown up with a healthy attachment on both, if I got lucky with both of my parents, I would have had that version of the operating system since I was a kid, but I didn't. So it sort of took EMDR to get the trauma out of the way, so I could finally, swap out, what I'd been kind of dealing with for so many years to one that I deal with now, which is, and deal with would be the wrong set of words, I enjoy and benefit from every day. So that would be my biggest in terms of ROI. In my own personal case, my brother was such a horrible, really, really horrible bully. And I had a bully in school as well. And anyone who's dealt with bullying knows that you basically, as a kid, you live in a state of terror all the time because you're never safe, and they can strike, and they do strike. And you're in a lunch line being punched. I remember being punched in the stomach in a lunch line in third grade and passing out and waking up looking at a circle of heads looking down at me as I looked up. And the other part of bullying that people know if they've been bullied is the humiliation aspect of it, because you're weak in front of everyone, all your classmates. So I would say that in my case, because my brother was such a menace, the idea that today, because he also started an EMDR journey with one of Debbie's colleagues about 6 months ago, we are having a relationship that we've never, ever had. And we have a Zoom call every Friday for like the last probably 3 months or so. And I'll use a word that I'm going to guess siblings wouldn't necessarily use, but it's accurate, which is intimacy, because of what our relationship is, because what our history is. And it's a really remarkable thing. And I was on the phone with him this morning, and actually I was crying because I wanted him to know that, now I know that if worse comes to worse, I have him.
Yeah.
I never thought I would see him again for the rest of my life. So this is one of the many, in my case, tangible, remarkable miracles that's come out of this work, again, for both of us, because he's gone through EMDR journey himself.
Right. I love that you say that, because we tend to think about the individual level, and now we're expanding it, right? So there's the family now, that relationship that you never thought you were going to have with your brother is now happening because he's going through, his own healing process.
And revelatory and transformative as you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'll just also for your audience, he's never set foot in his EMDR therapist's office. It's all been done by Zoom with no diminishment whatsoever of the efficacy of the therapy.
Yes, thank you for saying that. We've learned, over the past a year and a half or so, that EMDR can be extremely effective when done virtually. Before the pandemic, there was a lot of scare and fear about doing EMDR virtually, and now we see that it's very effective. We have preliminary studies coming out from both the United States and in England that showing the efficacy.
And you've got Prince Harry.
Yeah.
On Good Morning America, doing butterfly hug. So letting the whole world see him in an EMDR session.
Yes.
That's virtual.
Yes. I don't know how we went so far into this conversation without mentioning Prince Harry.
Well, we just did, but I mean, it's amazing because he's really put the EMDR on the map, and he also, I think, had like myself, he had other forms of therapy that led up to it, but he's basically his stand he's taking is that EMDR therapy is the therapy that finally brought relief for me. And he decided to be filmed doing EMDR therapy live with his therapist virtually.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he did good PR for the EMDR community for sure.
Yes.
So I want to end with a question that I ask every person I interview. I already asked Debbie in a previous interview, and I want to ask you, Michael, and I'll change the question a little bit, because I ask every person I interview, how do EMDR therapists get better? How can they get better? There is a learning curve. But since you're not a clinician, you experience EMDR from the client side. I want to ask, what did Dr. Magnavita do that was so different than the other experience that you had in therapy?
So in the book, in the acknowledgement section, I end my section by saying, and to Dr. Jeffrey Magnavita, thank you for being the champion that I never had. So I would say for me, starting with the attunement phenomenon, and there I was looking up the definition, but that alignment and empathy, where I felt no matter what come what may, I could absolutely count on him. And Debbie talks about this a lot. And we have actually one of the billboards is the woman holding the infant's hand as they stand at the shore of the beach, where you can see it's in one image of just the connection and attachment and care. That she wasn't going to get over the child's head in the water, and would be there to make sure that the journey was a safe one. That was probably the most profound. And I think that has to do with someone who has spent a time, he's a certified EMDR therapist. He keeps current. There's the retraining and all the other things that Debbie could talk about that require you to maintain your certification.
Yes.
But that's the clinical part of it. But the human part of it was just this incredible empathy and feeling like I was 100% safe. And that, and honestly, I don't know how Debbie does it. I don't know how you're able to do that with all of your clients, because you feel like it would take so much energy on your parts. But I'm sure all your clients probably would say the same thing, and Debbie would say the same thing. But it's such a gift, and it facilitates so much, because without that, you can't really do what you need to, which is basically be just bare soul, and there are no secrets, and everything is on the table.
Yeah. Debbie, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what Michael said, that there's the clinical part and the human part, which I don't think that in our work it's hard to separate, but if you can talk about maybe the two and the combination of both.
Yes, of course. So there's the methodology, the model and the methodology of EMDR. We've got our 8 phases, and we've got our assessment questions that we ask, and we've got all the steps that we go through. And someone can learn all of that. It doesn't take a lot to learn to really learn the steps of EMDR. But all of that has to be embedded in a relationship that feels safe and secure and attuned. And it really is a moment-to-moment task that the EMDR therapist needs to tend to, right? We're tracking our clients from the moment we say hello on the telephone. We're tracking our clients, and we're tracking emotion. We're listening to their words. We're watching their bodies. We're leaning in, to express our interest and our care and our curiosity. They're watching our faces and our bodies, right? They're tracking things that have nothing to do with words.
Right.
Our tone of voice, right? The compassion, our eye contact, all of that matters. All of that is a part of helping a client feel safe, feel seen, and feel courageous. And you have to be courageous to
Yes.
do EMDR,
Yeah.
right? It's hard work. And you have to know that you are, securely grounded with someone that is going to keep you tethered throughout the process, and that you're not going to get hijacked. You're not going to get swallowed up.
Yeah.
And so there's all different ways that we can convey our presence and our care. And it's important at every step of the way.
Absolutely. Michael mentioned, how he said as a client, he can't imagine how we do that, how we do EMDR with so many clients. I'm wondering, Debbie, if you can talk a little bit about your own personal process of what do you do to kind of balance that, because we do absorb, there's mirror neurons, right? There we absorb a lot, sometimes somatically even during an EMDR therapy session. So what do you personally do to maintain that balance and, I don't know, maybe your sanity when when doing this kind of work? Because it is a hard work, and we have to recognize that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking this question, because vicarious traumatization is real. We have to take care of ourselves. I try very hard to make sure that I move in between sessions, that I shake and I move and I use my muscles, and I regroup in those kinds of ways. If I feel like, a lot of difficult material came forward in a session and it feels like I'm somehow burdened by that, I make sure I kind of imaginally dump that off. I, clear my energy. Sometimes I imaginally will dig a hole in the floor of my office and just clear that energy and put it there before I start the next. I stay hydrated. I make sure I have colleagues that I can talk to very regularly. I've had the same peer group for 20 years, and when cases are very challenging, really being able to show up with what I'm carrying is very, very important. And I think also really making sure that I'm not working harder than my clients. I really challenge my clients to show up. I help them to show up. And when it really feels like we're in it together, when we're really working in collaboration, I think that's a buffer to burnout as well. This past year has been very, very hard, when we were all carrying our own anxiety and terror and exhaustion, and spending, sometimes 8 or 9 hours a day on screens. It was very, very difficult. But I think, making sure that we maintain balance, that we're nurturing ourselves, that we're having fun, that we're dancing and singing and doing, engaged in spiritual activities, if that's an important part of one's life. I think all of that is quite relevant.
Thank you, Debbie. Debbie Korn and Michael Baldwin, I want to thank both of you for taking the time and talking about, again, that book, Every Memory Deserves Respect. I know that I personally already started recommending some of my clients to read it. If any, there are a lot of clients that are still, interestingly, are skeptical about EMDR. I know that it was probably very different for you, Debbie. 30 years ago, there was not so much research about EMDR. Yeah, I know it was harder for people to trust and believe. But now we know, we have the evidence because we have the studies and the research, but we've also seen it. EMDR therapists see it every day. We see that, that almost magic of EMDR, how it transforms from, like what you said, Michael, about from going from operating system 1.0 to 2.0. So I really want to thank you for writing this wonderful book and taking the time to talking to me today.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation and great, great questions.
Thank you.